Skeleton Crew is the brand new live-action Star Wars series featuring Jude Law and many others, and is now streaming the first 2 episodes on Disney+. This show is purported to be something like Goonies in space. Is that the case? Let's talk about it. Now, the story starts off on an initially unknown planet featuring our main characters, Wim, Neil, Fern, and KB. And don't feel bad if you didn't pick up on their names watching the first 2 episodes. I personally had to look them up myself. Now, these characters live in a society where their path is essentially chosen for them. However, Wim, who's our main character, longs for adventure and fantasizes about becoming a Jedi. Neil is his best friend and kind of follows along with whatever Wim does, but he's also kind of a rules follower and kind of shies away from the more adventurous side of Wim. Then we also have Fern and KB, who are also friends, who we don't know quite as much about, but we do know that the lady who spoke at the kids' school early on, who's kind of telling them about the exams that are coming up, that's basically going to determine their life's future. We find out later that she is the mom of Fern, who you can tell is kind of a rebel. She's kind of hiding what she's actually doing behind the scenes. I guess they're preparing for some sort of race with her friend. But it seems as if Fern kind of has some high expectations placed upon her, and she's totally rebelling against that. And then, of course, we have her friend KB, who's kind of quiet, and we don't know much about her other than that she's kind of a tech whiz. So all the characters we're initially introduced to are children. However, I wouldn't necessarily call this a children's series. I don't think it's a kid's series, but it's definitely one that can be enjoyed by the whole family, I think. So in episode 1, we see the plot sort of take a new turn when Wim basically oversleeps for this major exam that's supposed to determine what he does for the rest of his life, and he decides to take a shortcut through the woods. He kind of passes through this suburban neighborhood and takes his little bike or speeder bike out into the woods, and he finds this thing buried in the dirt. He doesn't know exactly what it is, but he thinks it is a Jedi temple. So he ends up in space detention, and of course, Fern, the girl, she's there as well. And at that point, Wim accidentally tells her about this lost Jedi temple he supposedly found. So anyway, all the characters kind of sneak off to this area to kind of investigate and see what is actually inside this, kind of looks like a hatch, kind of a little reminiscent of Lost, I guess. They finally get inside, and it turns out it's not a Jedi temple, but it's actually a spaceship. And Wim, being the curious kid he is, presses a button he's not supposed to. It starts up and it starts flying away, and all of them are blasted off into hyperspace, and that brings us into episode 2. From here, our characters are taken to this sort of pirate spaceport where they're just trying to figure out how to get home, and they ended up getting captured, and they end up running into Jude Law's character right at the end in prison. I'll say overall, I wasn't necessarily blown away by these first 2 episodes, but I enjoyed them. I'm looking forward to see what happens. I'd say there's some great visual effects. A lot of these Star Wars shows, I feel like, do a good job with them. They do seem to be going for kind of more the pirate and almost like a treasure island sort of aesthetic mixed with Star Wars, and I think it's pulled off pretty well. One thing I also really appreciate is the practical effects. Not that there's like a ton of them, but I do notice that with there's the droid that they encounter in the ship, which is obviously somewhat of an animatronic, maybe even a puppet. They also have like some other creature they encounter when they first get to the spaceport, and it's obviously a puppet, or it may even be animated by stop motion. I'm not quite sure. Obviously, those are not the greatest visual effects ever, but I appreciate them. It's very reminiscent of a lot of older films like Terminator. I feel like the droid kind of gave me Terminator vibes, and of course, we originally had puppets in Star Wars for Yoda and many of the aliens originally. But now for the main question, is this Goonies in space? Well, I have to say that something about the premise and the plot of this does feel very familiar. Now, it's been a long time since I've seen Goonies, and I do see some elements pulled from there from what I remember, but I honestly don't remember the entire plot of Goonies to know if they're borrowing a lot from that. I can't remember where I heard that initially. Maybe it was the director who called it that, or one of the Lucasfilm executives may have called it that. But I kind of wish they hadn't just thrown that out there that it's Goonies in space or Goonies in Star Wars. I kind of would have liked to kind of come to that conclusion on my own and just kind of let it be what it is. But in the sense that it's children who go on an adventure, they are kind of looking for lost treasure, and there's kind of a more almost like a kid Indiana Jones flavor to it, I could kind of see the parallels there. Now, I will say my biggest criticism about at least the first episode is this planet that they're on, that is kind of their home world. It honestly just feels too earthly to me. Like, literally they're walking down this like suburban street. They're going to this like elementary school. You can see lockers, and I don't know, it just feels like almost like the Jetsons, like almost like they took like a real life American city and just added some futuristic elements to it. And honestly, it kind of just took me out of what I feel like Star Wars is and what the Star Wars aesthetic is. I feel like the Star Wars aesthetic is, yes, futuristic, but it's kind of mixed with this more ancient and rustic feel. Again, it is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But to be fair, once they finally leave their home planet, it does start to feel a little more like Star Wars going into episode 2. Some other critiques, you know, some of the dialogue felt a little clunky, but you know, these are child actors. I'm gonna cut them some slack. I feel like they did a pretty good job overall. But I'll also say there were one or two situations I can think of that just felt like out of place, like very unrealistic. I guess the main one that comes to mind is in episode 2, they're stuck in this jail cell, and there's this little rat who comes out of like the eyeball of the robot, and for some reason one of the kids has this idea, oh, what if we can train it to go and retrieve the key? And all the kids just like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And I'm kind of like, I need a little more explanation for this. Like, can they communicate with this rat? Like, how are they going to get them to do this? Why do all of them just agree that this is something that is possible? There are a few elements like that. It's just not the best writing, honestly. But I won't spend too much time criticizing it. Honestly, I go into these Star Wars shows and movies, and most movies in general, with some high expectations. I'm looking to just enjoy myself and not be too critical of it. So a couple of things I enjoyed. I enjoyed that they actually finally got a werewolf character. For those of you who don't know, the original Cantina scene in A New Hope actually had this like werewolf type alien that shows up. But I guess because it seems like it's drawing too much from something else outside of Star Wars, George Lucas completely took that out in his extended versions. And of course, we've seen these wolf characters show up just a little bit here and there sprinkled in. I know it was in like The Force Awakens, you see him walk by, but to see an actual character who is one of the Wolfman aliens, I don't even know what they're called, it was kind of cool. Obviously, I love getting to see Cyborg Steve Urkel. And I will say they did a good job building in some sort of mystery or some sort of intrigue into the second episode. Now, I will say the way they framed the first episode, if they had just ended it with that and didn't release 2 episodes together, I probably might not feel so inclined to tune in the night that it releases next week. But in episode 2, you see this plot sort of thicken a little bit. Obviously, they're trying to figure out their way home, and as they're asking around, people are asking them, okay, what planet are you from? And they say Ata-Atin, and people are like, oh, you're just fooling with me. Well, what we find out is that there is something strange about this planet that they're from, Ata-Atin. It apparently is from some sort of myth, like it's some sort of lost planet, and all of them believe that it doesn't even exist anymore, and they almost kind of treat it like this treasure island or treasure planet, if you will. And when you think back to episode 1, you do pick up on a few strange things about the planet. Namely, they mention when they first got out up into space, the kids don't even know what the stars are. And it seems that there's some sort of barrier, is what they call it. I'm guessing it might be some sort of shield around the planet that prevents them from being able to see the night sky. And what I'm suspecting is it may even be a barrier that cloaks the entire planet so no one can find it. And on top of that, you find out that ships are not really supposed to come in or leave the planet. Oh, and they also mention that the money that Wim is paying with is apparently old Republic credits. So not new Republic credits. This is back from before the Empire. So apparently this planet has been hidden from view even before the Empire. So there's definitely some interesting stuff there that I'm looking forward to learning more about. Now guys, if you're enjoying this video so far, we are a brand new channel, so it would mean a lot if you do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe below. And finally, at the end of episode 2, we get to see Jude Law's character introduced, and it turns out he's actually a Jedi. And I will say, the more I thought about them having a Jedi character in this series, it kind of makes sense, because honestly, this series could have stood alone as just a great sci-fi adventure. But adding a Jedi at least connects this overall to the Star Wars universe. But this does add some intrigue, you know? It leaves us wondering, is he really a Jedi? Could he be Sith? He's at the very least a Force user, and if he's a Jedi, how could he have survived? Because this is apparently taking place many years after Return of the Jedi with the New Republic. We'll obviously find out more in future episodes, but overall, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in this show, and I'm enjoying it so far. But I'd be curious to know what you think about Skeleton Crew. Please let us know in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And lastly, I just want to let you know that no matter what you're going through, you are not alone. God is with you, and He loves you, and we do too. I'll catch you next time.